Guys, thank you very much for having me here. I'm going to speak about behavior-driven development with Drupal. First of all, I would like to find out how many of you know or have used BDD on your project. Yeah? Okay, a few people. Okay. This is not going to be a very technical presentation. It's more business-oriented. So I'll be talking about when you should use BDD and how you should use BDD on your projects. So first of all, what I want to say is that BDD is not about testing. I exaggerated a bit. What I really want us to say is that it's not only about testing. The primary reason for introducing BDD in your organization should not be testing. I think it is a mistake to use BDD when you just want to have tests on your project. So the goal of this presentation is to show you why and when you should consider using BDD. And this is only when actually BDD provides your business with some sort of value. So first of all, I want to start from the very, very beginning, just to look at what BDD is. So how BDD works. So you write scenarios that describe behaviors of your system, and then the scenarios are executed against your application. So when you think about this, this is very similar to test-driven development. So what is different? So the difference is that you actually write your scenarios in plain English or any other human-readable language. I know people doing that in French, but I presume you can use any language, although it may be a bit more difficult to do that. So you write each step of your scenario in plain English, and then, of course, you need to have something that is going to execute the scenarios. If you write the scenarios in plain English, you also need to write each step of your scenarios in PHP to be able to actually run the tests. So when you think about this, you realize that there is quite a big problem here. Basically, you need to maintain the plain English scenarios, the human-readable language scenarios, and also you need to maintain the PHP code. So why would you actually do that? Why would you want to do it twice if you could just write your tests in PHP? There is a reason for that. I'm going to explain that later on. But for now, I just want to tell you a story. Let's forget about BDD for now. And I will tell you about one of the biggest IT projects that started in the UK quite a long time ago. So in the UK, you've got the National Health Service, which is basically public health service provider. And back in 2002, they started a massive IT project. So they wanted to put all medical data into one big system, so every doctor in the country could actually access the data at when someone came in. So the project started in 2002, and after 8 years of development, it was terminated in 2010. So that was 8 years of development, and as you can imagine, that cost quite a lot of money. That actually cost over 14 billion euros. So that was quite... That was a massive, massive, massive project. So just to put that into some sort of context, 200 billion Norwegian crowns, I think. So that is just to put that into some sort of context. 14 billion euros would pay a salary of 60,000 nurses for 10 years in the United Kingdom. Or 240,000 nurses in Eastern Europe.
So they could have just paid someone to record all the data and run around to all the hospitals and
Yeah, yeah.
Stayed Poland for 2 years, the end.
Possibly, yeah. Yeah, so you would expect quite a sophisticated piece of software for this kind of money. So I mentioned the project was terminated in 2010, and a lot of public money was spent on it. So the question is what the taxpayer received. And actually, they received nothing. There was an inquiry conducted by the government in the UK into the project, and the outcome of the inquiry was that actually the project, the system does not meet the requirements of National Health Service in the UK. They used a bit of the systems in certain areas at some point, but the whole system, basically, the whole project was terminated. So the question now is, why did happen? Why this happened? What actually happened that after 8 years of development, this is the result? So there was a study conducted in 2007 by the Computing Technology Industry Association. They wanted to find out why big IT projects fail. I'm going to give you some sort of idea. I'm going to give you the 3 most common reasons why projects fail. So the first one is the third one actually is unrealistic deadlines. So people think they can accomplish something much quicker than they actually can. The second most common reason is insufficient resource planning. So people think that they can build something with fewer developers, with less money than they actually can. What is the first most common reason? Does anybody know? Can you guess? Go on.
Unclear requirements.
Yeah, very, very close. So it is poor communication, which is unclear requirements pretty much. Yeah. So this is the most common reason why big IT projects, we are talking about big projects, fail. There was another most recent study conducted in 2013 in the UK by the Project Management Institute. And they found out that 2/5 of big IT projects fail, 2/5. But what is really important, interesting here, is that 50% of the failures are due to ineffective communication. So as you can see, communication is very, very important on IT projects. So we know that it is important. Why it is important? Just when you think about this, when 2 people communicate, when you want to pass, when you are working on a big IT project as a developer, what do? You basically you code to deliver some sort of business value. You want to what you want to do is to find out what the business wants to do and implement it. And how do you know what the business value is and what it is? It's actually what really matters to the business. Business value is what really matters to the business, and you find out what really matters to the business through effective communication. That's why effective communication is so important. And why communication is difficult? Because even if you communicate every day, when 2 people communicate every day, you will have a lot of misunderstandings. When you speak to your girlfriend, when you speak to your parents, you will have misunderstandings. And then when you think about 2 different people, a technical person, a business person, communicate, they speak different languages. So you will get even more misunderstandings. And then when you think about a big, like a massive IT project with many people involved, many stakeholders involved, you need to realize that there is absolutely nobody, no single person who fully understands the scope of the project. So there is nobody, no one person that you can go to and find out what's going on the project. There are many people responsible for many different areas of the project, but there is no one person. So we've got misunderstandings all the time. That's why communication on big IT project is difficult. So this is the most important slide of this presentation. If you are to remember anything from this presentation, I would like you to remember this slide. The main idea behind BDD is to prevent communication gaps. So basically, BDD is here. BDD was actually is here to facilitate communication between people on a project. This is what I said from the very beginning, at the very beginning. If you just do that for testing, yes, you can do that, but you are missing out a massive area where BDD can help you. So, on a typical big IT project, okay, you've got software developers. Those software developers can write tests. In Drupal, the tests could be written in PHP. And when they are written in PHP, the software developer is actually the only person who understands those tests. So this is a very typical TDD approach. You've got other people on a project, for example, QA analysts. If a QA analyst, a test person, is a bit technical, he may be able to understand those tests written in a programming language, but very often it happens that they don't. They just do some UAT testing, but they don't understand the automated tests. Then you've got people like business analysts. They don't understand that. Then you've got a product owner, for example. They don't understand those tests. And BDD is here to actually make the test understandable to everybody. That's why you've got the test written in plain English. And this is BDD. BDD facilitates communication on a project. It makes it easier for people to communicate requirements, for example. So what are the benefits of BDD? The first one should be very obvious for you right now. This is collaboration and communication. It provides same language for everybody. The second one, you could guess as well, this is quality. So you've got functional integration regression tests. The third one, it is prioritization. It's quite similar to the first one. So basically, because the business can be involved in writing tests, it's easier to prioritize things. As a developer, you would know what to do first, because the business would tell you by contributing to the scenarios. You know where the business value is. You know what is more important. And the fourth one, people tend to forget about this, but if everybody is able to access the tests, you've got actually documentation. Because everything is written in plain English, you can use those tests as documentation on your project. So what is BDD? There are many different definitions. My favorite actually is this one. So it's an agile technique based on TDD. It's not a methodology. You can use it with any approach that you would use in your company, such as Kanban or Scrum. It doesn't replace your methodology. It's just a technique that you can adopt. So it's an agile technique based on TDD that promotes communication and close collaboration between everybody in the team, and focuses on writing specification of the system behavior. So basically, you write examples of how the system should behave. BDD solves TDD shortcomings. I actually said something about this before. So it's basically, as a developer, when you are the only person who writes tests, you are not so sure what actually you should test and what you should not test. When it comes from the business, when the business is able to contribute those tests, again, they know where the business value is, and they will tell you, a product owner, a business analyst would tell you, okay, this is very important, this area is very important, this is where we should actually focus. We need to cover quite a lot in this particular area of a project. Where to start with development, very similar to the previous one, and how to understand why tests fail. This is actually quite interesting because when you run those tests, it will show you that it actually failed on a particular line of the test, and then everybody knows why the test fails because it's written in plain English. So it's very easy for everybody, not only for the developer, to figure out why a test fails. So very quickly, some sort of examples of BDD. This is actually very easy. If you have worked on projects where you use Scrum or Kanban when you needed to write user stories, this is very similar. So feature in BDD is basically an area of functionality on your project. It starts with a story. When you must be familiar with that. As a role, I want feature so that I receive some sort of business value. So a very simple example from authentication system. So for example, as a user, I want to log in so that I can access my account. And then when you think about this, there may be many different scenarios. So for example, when I provide incorrect password, what's going to happen? When the user is blocked, what's going to happen? So below this story in the feature, you've got those different scenarios, BDD scenarios. So those BDD scenarios are structured in this way. Given some initial context, when an event occurs, then ensure some outcomes. So for example, if I'm on the login page, when I try to log in with my credentials, then I should see my account page. So that could be the first scenarios for that feature. And then you could have like another scenario where you actually provide an incorrect password and you want to find out whether the message, like wrong credentials message, is displayed on the page. You want to make sure that you actually cannot log in with an incorrect password, or you cannot log in if the user is blocked. So many different scenarios could follow one simple feature. So what is a BDD scenario? So it is a specification that everybody understands, again, because it's written in English. Then it is documentation that everybody can refer to. So everybody on the project should be able to access it and should be able to read it, and from there should be able to understand what actually the application does. And it's an automated test that can be run anytime to ensure quality of your application. So now I'm just going to talk briefly about BDD in the context of Drupal. So what you actually need to be able to do BDD with Drupal. First of all, you need a BDD framework. For PHP, and it's not only for Drupal, it is Behat. So you can write tests of your scenarios in a human readable language called Gherkin, and Behat will parse those tests for you and will connect those every step in your scenario to a step definition. The step definitions will be written in a programming language. So basically, Behat is a framework that is able to understand those scenarios written in plain English and match them to step definition written in a programming language. You have to have it to be able to do BDD. Then the second tool that you would use is Mink. Mink is actually used for web acceptance tests. So it provides out-of-the-box step definitions that would allow you to test your website through the user interface. So basically scenarios such as, if I go to this page, I want to see this kind of message. So from the user perspective. So with Mink, Mink will run a headless browser that would basically load the content of a page, and then you would inspect the content of the page in your scenarios to make sure that certain things are present on a page or not present on a page, or actually displayed in the way you want them to be displayed. And then this is a very important thing for Drupal people. You've got Drupal extensions. So Drupal extensions provide Drupal-specific scenarios and step definitions. So basically, you don't have to write the step definitions and your scenarios from scratch, because certain functionality on every Drupal project is quite similar. You've got the login page, you've got some functionality that is very common to many sites. So with Drupal extension, you will have those already there. So you can basically start testing straight away. So for example, set up test data with Drush or the Drupal API. They would allow you to define theme regions and test data, whether data appear actually within those regions, or clear the cache, log out. So all those tasks that you need to do to be able to test your website. So we've got 3 types of Drupal extensions. The first one is a black box driver. Again, it allows you, the most important thing about the black box driver is actually that it allows you to map Drupal regions to like human, to strings that everybody would be able to understand. So normally, if you, for example, if you want to find out whether a block is displayed in a region of your theme, you would have to go to the website and you will have to first of all find the region. How would you know that you are looking at the right region? You could inspect the CSS to see whether there is a class or an ID that you expect it to be. So basically, black box driver map the CSS ID to a string that is understandable by everybody in the team. So you could name your regions, and then you can write tests that will say, for example, like, if I go to this particular page, I want to see this block in this region, and this is what is going to help you with. Obviously, if you had to test everything through the web interface, it wouldn't be very efficient, because you, for example, if you want to authenticate and then be able to test some sort of system behavior, you don't want to load the page, enter your credentials, log in, and then go to another page and see whether something is happening there. So we need to have another way. That would take a long of time, so we need another way to be able to test that quicker. So you've got a Drupal API driver. So basically, what you can do here is to write tests that would use Drupal API to perform some tasks in the system. The Drupal API driver is much quicker, simply because you are not testing your website through the Drupal interface. You are testing your website using the Drupal API. And then you've got a Drush driver, which is quite similar to Drupal API. Basically, you can use Drush in your tests. So, if you remember, I mentioned that it is important that everybody in the team can actually read the scenarios. So they can read because the scenarios are written in plain English, but can everybody access these scenarios? So if you look at this picture again, if the scenarios are written and along the code, what would happen to these scenarios? Most of the time, the software developer will actually check it into some sort of version control system, Git, for example. So how will all these people actually be able to access it? So it may be quite difficult. If a QA analyst is a technical person, if he is a technical person, maybe he's going to check out the code and look at the scenarios. But if you think about a business analyst or a product owner, they are not going to do that. I know you've got some web interfaces that allow you to go into the repository and view actually those scenarios. They could navigate through the code and figure out where the scenarios are and look through them. However, this is probably not the best approach. So if you think about this, there is one place on every project, at least there should be, that everybody is going to access on a regular basis. Can you think about what it could be? Yeah.
Something like Jira?
Yeah. It's basically an issue tracker. So the idea is to put those scenarios into something like Jira. And basically, Behat would have to actually fetch the scenarios from Jira and execute it.
You know how to do that?
There is a Behat Jira extension.
I have to write this down.
Yeah, there is.
Put these in Jira right now.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Yeah. So there are extensions. There is the Behave Pro extension for Jira, and you could actually do that. So it basically you can tell Behat, go to Jira, fetch this test, and then execute it. So yeah. So now when you think about this, you are actually removing the last block that prevents people from accessing and using running BDD in your company the way it should be run. You end up with something like this. And this is proper BDD. This is where everybody actually can access all the scenarios. Everybody can read them, and everybody can much easier communicate on a big project. So are there any drawbacks? Can you think about any disadvantages of using BDD? Of course there are, and the biggest one is it increases the cost of maintenance. And as I said at the very beginning, you have to maintain scenarios in plain English, and you have to maintain scenarios in a programming language. You do it twice. You really do it twice. So before doing BDD, make sure that there is enough return on investment to justify it. So it will probably not work on small projects. If you are a developer on a small project, and if you want to write tests, and then if you're the only one person or you and your colleagues who are going to access and make use of those tests, you are not doing you are not doing BDD in the right way. It may help you. I'm not saying that it will not. However, you are missing out a massive portion of BDD. So a couple of examples from business, very short ones, from my clients. So, for example, there is a publishing company in the UK called Dennis Publishing. They've got many different websites. So for example, one of them is Auto Express. You can easily notice where the revenue is coming from on those websites. So you've got advert. Yeah. So it is very important for Dennis Publishing to make sure that when they deploy a new version of the website, the adverts are actually there. If they disappear suddenly, they are losing a lot of money. This is another website of Dennis Publishing. Advert. There are more down there. Car buyer. Advert. So you can imagine that developers could write BDD tests that would actually say that if I go to this website, I need to make sure, and if I look into this region, there is an advert. And at Dennis Publishing, many developers work at many different projects at the same time. They've got like a Kanban board, and you just pick up the ticket, and oh, this one is Cloud Pro, this one is Car Buyer. So they don't really know where the adverts should be. Who knows that? There are people in the in advertising who know what adverts should be where. If they can access the scenarios written in plain English, they can actually make sure that yes, this is what the developers are doing. It's right. We need an advert here, and we need an advert here. So Dennis Publishing a few years ago moved all their websites to Drupal, and this is a quotation from Paul Lomax, who is the CTO at Dennis Publishing. The best decision ever made was to bring actually all the websites into Drupal, and adopting BDD has been one of the best decisions they've made. So it helped them a lot. Another example, it's a company called Funding Tree. It's a crowdfunding company. So if you've got a business, if you want to start a business or you need money and you need money for your business, you can start running campaigns on the website. You say you need X amount of money, and then there are many investors who would actually, if they like your business idea, they would invest in your business. So a pitch can look like this. You've got a business. This is how much you need. It is £40,000 here. This is how much you have raised so far, 25,000. And here in this big table, there are all the people that actually pledged money to your business. So as you can see, someone said, okay, I can lend you £780 at 11%. And then other people. So there are a really small amount of money. To actually get to 40,000 K, it's going to take a lot of people. And when it is time limited, so when the time is up, the system needs to determine, for example, whether the target has been reached. And if not, what we need to do. If it was exceeded, if it was more than 40K, what we need to do. Who are those people who we are accepting the investments from, and who, what actually investment we actually reject to get the 40K. So as you can imagine, with this number of people, it must be very difficult to test it. If you want to test it manually, it's going to be very, very difficult. So Funding Tree used actually BDD so that they could, they wrote different scenarios, what's going to happen when the time is up and a business pitch closes. And they ran the test to test the application. It was done via BDD because actually the rules for closing a pitch were quite complex. So they needed to collaborate, the developers needed to collaborate closely with the business to be able to understand the rules. And BDD helped them a lot with actually understanding the rules because they had it written in plain English. This is what we do if this happens. This is what we do if this happens. So that's Funding Tree. Another institution that I work for, the Bank of England, they use Drupal. They use a Drupal distribution called Deacon. Do you know Deacon at all? Deacon is a Drupal distribution used for data portals. So for example, the Bank of England, they've got many different departments, and they want to have a central place where they put all the data coming out, or references to the data coming out from different departments. So that if I sit in one department and want to find out about something else happening in another department, I can just go to the data portal and search for the data from that department. And I've got contact details to the right person, to the person that I should talk to if I need more information about the data. So at an institution such as a bank, it is very important to be compliant. So you need to make sure that the right people have access to the right resources on your web application. So again, they started using BDD, and BDD is going to help them to make sure that they're compliant with security. And okay, I'm coming to the end of the presentation. I'm going to give you some references if you want to find out more. First of all, it's Dan North. Dan North is the guy who actually came up with this idea. He realized that if he could get business people involved into writing tests, it would probably be much easier to communicate requirements on a project. So there are a lot of interesting articles on this particular website there. Then you've got Behat, and so this is the framework that will allow you to use BDD with Drupal or any PHP framework. You've got Mink for web acceptance, and this is a very nice website that is going to explains to you what the Drupal extensions are and how to use them. So yeah, this is it. Thank you very much. A bit about myself, Marcin Pajdzik, that's my name. When you see how it is written, you think it may be very difficult to pronounce, but it's not. I've been working as a consultant through my limited company for the past 8 years in the UK and in Europe, working for many different clients on Drupal projects sometimes, and sometimes not on Drupal projects. I've got my own startup. It is Onlycard. It has nothing to do with Drupal. It is set to disturb the automotive industry. I hope you're going to hear about this later on, in a year or two.
I guess if it disturbs it.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, please find me on LinkedIn if you want to connect, and you can find me on Twitter as well. Thank you very much for having me here. Thank you very much for listening. And yeah, if you have any questions, you can ask me now or later. Yeah, go on.
Gherkin, it's the same language as Cucumber, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah, that's the same. Yeah.
I guess it has sort of two aspects to it. I mean, one is the, getting the Gherkin stories to sort of, okay, this whole team needs to agree on the specification first, and then you have sort of the technical testing aspect of it. How do you decide whether to write a test for it or not? Because some tests can be really, really complicated.
Yeah,
and
they
like,
can
okay,
be.
It's not worth it. I mean, you will like have 20 steps or something.
Yeah, you can.
Who decides that? Is that something you work with a client, or is it mostly like a technical?
Yeah, you have to work. This is the thing. You have to work with the business. What you test and what you not test on a project is a business decision. So, for example, like I showed you funding tree. So you can imagine that those tests for closing business pitches, crowdfunding pitches, will be quite complex. We had 40 steps in a scenario to be able to actually make sure that we've got all the conditions in there, and then we test the right results. And a developer needed to work very closely with a business person to be able to actually put together those tests and in the right way. But once you've done it, then the business person can read them. If they want to do any change, they can easily communicate that change to the technical person. So yeah, to answer your questions, you need to talk to the business. The business drives this. It is called behavior-driven development, but I actually like to call it business-driven development, because what you actually do comes from the business. Yeah.
I think this can all. I haven't done it before, but it seems like you go into like a lot of scenarios. So I think if you like have often like business objectives are more like high level. We want to increase revenue, or we want to have more loyal customers.
Okay.
So on. How do you? Is there any link between these sort of high level objectives with these things?
Well, you can make this link, I presume. So if you've got an objective, then you need to come up with some sort of way of implementing that. Like, okay, if you want to have more customers, for example, on an e-commerce site, yeah. So what do you actually need to do to get more customers? So the business needs to think about this and decide, all right, if we create a specific page that is going to present a product in a certain way to the customer, maybe more appealing way, don't know what it can be, then this would be probably your feature in BDD. And then you need to decide, as a business, you need to decide what is important, what are the most important functionality, what is the most important functionality on that page or pages, and then you could write scenarios that would test all those things. I think this is how you do it. Yeah. Anybody else? No? Thank you very much then.